welcome back to my channel. In today's video I would like to review the recent Chris Packham documentary on ADHD and dyslexia, which I watched on BBC iPlayer. It's called Inside Our Minds, and it was a sort of sequel to the documentary that Packham did, can't remember when it was now, a couple of years ago, on autism. So I watched it and I took a lot of notes. I basically watched it with subtitles on. I always watch programmes with subtitles on. I can't take it in otherwise. And wrote down a lot of what he said so I could kind of process it and kind of do a video on it and let you know what it covered, really. Let me know if any of you have watched it, and for those who haven't watched it, you might find it interesting. So first of all, for one on ADHD, I thought all in all it was quite interesting. I mean, it didn't really tell me anything I didn't already know about ADHD. But I guess it was quite surprising that one of the first things Chris Packham said, which annoyed me, I knew there were going to be some of these moments in it that would annoy me. It didn't, as I say, it kind of spoiled it because I think the rest of the documentary was reasonably well done. But he did say at the start, he said, I don't like calling ADHD, I don't like calling it a disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, he said. It's more of a difference in the way the brain works. I don't know why he had to say that. I thought that was completely unnecessary. But I suppose it's in keeping with other things I've heard Chris Packham say before about autism, where he once said he doesn't think it's a disability, which I thought was very inappropriate and irresponsible for someone who's quite high up. It's a shame because otherwise I respect Chris Packham and I think he's generally a good man, but I feel like he doesn't need to say things like that. I think it's quite irresponsible, and I know he got a lot of slack about that at the time when he said autism's not a disability, which is really inappropriate, particularly considering the context of like government cuts and things. Cuts to benefits and stuff. Autism is legally defined as a disability, so that was a very inappropriate comment. And of course, even if he himself doesn't experience it as a disability, and obviously he's done pretty well in life and like is quite high up, and obviously like even by like non-autistic standards, he's got like a good job and he's obviously doing well for himself. Obviously, I know it hasn't always been like that for him, and he has had like real struggles and stuff. But if he doesn't experience it as a disability, that's his personal kind of experience, but ultimately it is legally defined as a disability, and for most autistic people it is experienced as such in their day-to-day lives. So that was a very inappropriate comment, and I know he got a lot of criticism for it. So I kind of wasn't surprised that he might say something similar about ADHD, denying it's a disorder, when of course ADHD is a disorder. It's a medical condition. And I think trying to deny the disorder doesn't actually help anyone. It just trivialises the condition. You don't go to see a doctor just because of a slight difference in the way your brain works. It's not equivalent, say, to being left-handed. Obviously, being left-handed can cause all sorts of problems. Certainly did in the past. Now it's far more accommodated. But you could say, well, left-handedness is simply a difference. You accommodate it with left-handed scissors or whatever, or those sort of things, and problem gone. It's not intrinsically a disability, left-handedness. It is a disability when the context makes it such, when it's not accommodated, but it's basically only a disability caused by society. Inherently, intrinsically, left-handedness is not a disorder, it's simply a difference. ADHD is not like being left-handed. It's an actual disorder, and it's a disorder, society can accommodate it, society can, do things that make life easier for someone with ADHD, but ultimately a person with ADHD will still experience difficulties. You can't completely get rid of the dysfunction, and it just has to be something the person has to manage, either with medication or with other other ways. But yeah, it's a disorder, and saying it's not a disorder, I don't think helps anyone, and just makes me quite annoyed. And I think it's quite an irresponsible thing to say. It didn't surprise me because I was expecting him to come out of that because he's quite neurodiversity pro. But yeah, it was just unnecessary, and I think it spoiled the rest of the programme really, which otherwise was a good programme. It just was completely unnecessary and he didn't need to say it. So that's the first thing. He mentioned that people with ADHD don't have a deficit of attention strictly. Now that is true, yes, ADHD is a disorder, yes it is a deficit, but it's not specifically to do with attention. So the name ADHD is actually a little bit of a misnomer because it implies that someone with it doesn't have any attention, that they can't concentrate at all, that they can't focus on anything, and of course that's not the case. Instead, as Chris Packham said, they struggle to regulate their attention. So yeah, it's a problem with regulation. It's a problem with regulating your attention in an appropriate way to get tasks done. It's to get the mind quickly jumping from one thing to the next, being highly distractible, finding it hard to consistently attend to something. Unless, of course, which Chris Packham didn't really go into the whole phenomenon of hyperfocus. I suppose there is only so much time in the programme, so you can't really go into everything. But some people with ADHD do have the ability to hyperfocus on tasks of which they are very, very, very interested in or engaged in, or if there's a sense of like pressure or adrenaline and stress where they have to get a task done very quickly and urgently, then the person with ADHD can, not in all cases, it's very variable, but there is a possibility that the person with ADHD might enter sort of a state of hyperfocus where they can completely lose track of time and can be extremely, extremely like tunnel vision focus on that one thing. And that hyperfocus obviously can be seen in autism as well, where there is a certain overlap. But yeah, so it's not the case that a person with ADHD doesn't have any attention. It's the case that they struggle to regulate the attention. It's to do with executive control. So then he went and he met his first sort of case study, if you like, which was someone called Henry, a young man, and he was diagnosed with ADHD during his A-levels, so comparatively late, but not as late as they come. And he said he tried medication, but he didn't like how it made him feel, so he's not currently on medication. He lives in London with his flatmate, and he was originally from Oxford, and he works as a tour guide, and in London he works as a tour guide, and he has an abundance of energy in his job, and Packham said this is often associated with the hyperactive side of ADHD. He's very exuberant and full of energy, and obviously does a good job, and it's obviously something that he's very interested in. And he channels that into his work. Obviously not all people with ADHD can do that. He's obviously one of the more fortunate ones that he has obviously found a job that he enjoys and is good at. That isn't the case for all people with ADHD. It's not the case that all people with ADHD can harness it, if you like, in that way, particularly those who have more severe difficulties. And then Chris Packham talks about the fact that he said, well, what I'm not seeing in Henry, he said, are any signs of a struggle, because I guess that's just showing one side to his life. It's not showing a whole side, it's just showing a kind of snapshot, so you're not like seeing the complete kind of picture of what's going on in his life, so it can be kind of a bit misleading. If you're just seeing one aspect of a person's life, you're not seeing a whole aspect of a person's life. So as Chris says, Chris was wondering if there are other times in Henry's life where having ADHD is not quite as helpful. So then the video the documentary delves into the other aspects of Henry's life that a person might not see in his kind of you know, in his facade as a tour guide, you're not necessarily going to see the other aspects of his life. So he talks about his struggles, like forgetting his keys, forgetting his wallet, being late for work, missing parties that his friends have organised months in advance for their birthdays, missing a dissertation meeting at university because he wakes up and all he can think about is what he wanted to have for breakfast, which is weird for him because he never normally eats breakfast. So he made breakfast, and then meanwhile he missed 25 missed calls on his phone. But the night before, he went to bed knowing that he had his dissertation meeting tomorrow. But when he woke up, his priority was to make breakfast and he completely forgot about it, so he got into trouble. Again, it showed his bedroom, which is part of his flat that he's most embarrassed about, where his clothes are on his floor, just dumped everywhere. He said it's a loose system, he says. But he just puts clothes on the floor for ones that he's not sure. For ones that he's not sure if he can wear again, and he hasn't the stomach to check, he would just dump on the floor. And then he's got another pile full of dirty stuff, all his jumpers and everything. And his coffee machine is broken, and it's just been sitting there on the floor, broken for 9 months, but he hasn't been able to move it. And Chris Packham makes very clear that Henry and people like him are not lazy. That this difference in people like Henry are not lazy, essentially, because someone who doesn't know about ADHD might maybe assume that the person's lazy. You know, they see that the person's very messy, they've got things dumped all over the place, why can't they pick them up, what's going on, you know, can't they motivate themselves to do it? But it's got nothing to do with laziness. It says that the difference in Henry was spotted early when he was still at school, although obviously he wasn't diagnosed till his A-levels. But then Chris goes on to meet another person for whom the road to diagnosis was much longer. Okay, I'm going to move over to video number 2 now to carry on going on, but I'm going to have to do this over several videos, I think. Just first of all, kind of going over what's in the programme and then more of my own thoughts. So moving over to video number 2 now.